over hyaluronic acid dermal fillers? Do you think the time has come now for you to look into devices or biostimulators like Sculptra? Maybe you're even thinking about having surgery or threads. But is none of those options really hitting the spot for you? I'm here today to talk to you about the best injectable you've probably never heard of. It's my absolute number one favorite. It's JULÄINE from Sweden. If you've ever wanted a treatment that stimulates your own collagen, lifts and tightens, and gets better over time, then this is the treatment for you. And look, I know that everybody says that their product does this, but this one actually does do it, and it does it in a little bit of a different way, which is better than any of the alternatives that I have tried. It's no secret that the major hyaluronic acid dermal filler companies are reporting a decrease in people having these treatments performed because people are buying less. So what are people doing instead, and why? There's of course still a place for regular hyaluronic acid. I still use it for lip augmentation or sometimes for beneath the eye and indeed for other areas. But many patients are requesting an alternative, and indeed I would argue that for most things that we would use hyaluronic acid for in the past, JULÄINE is actually better. In this video, I'm going to explain to you what JULÄINE is, what makes it different, what to expect during the procedure, and show you some results. Let's just show you some results now to get you excited. So this is my patient. She is in her mid-50s. She has lost a lot of weight, so she's looking a little gaunt. She's actually slimmer on the images on the right as opposed to the left. She has received no other treatment aside from the JULÄINE and some tox. By the way, I'm using Nuceiva now instead of regular Botox. I think it's really good. I think you call it Juvo in America. I could have made an approximation of this using hyaluronic acid filler, but you would not have got the tissue firming, the compaction that you get with the JULÄINE. You wouldn't have got the same kind of skin quality improvement at sites distant from where I had injected the JULÄINE. So she had had the temples, the submalar region, nasolabial fold, the neck. The neck I'm particularly pleased with, and I think one session beneath the eye also. So this result is extremely natural in comparison with the result that you would have got using a hyaluronic acid. She had a total of 6 sessions in those images. She had sometimes 1 vial to the face, sometimes 2, ditto to the neck as well. So it was a number of sessions, but I think the results speak for themselves. So I was involved with some of the initial case studies when the product first came over to the UK, and I've been using it now since December 2024. I've done around 500 cases now. In fact, they gave me a balloon for my case number 200. Actually, it was way after that, but anyway, it's nice to have a gift, isn't it? Oh, what have we got here? There's some real tension, some real excitement. What is it? Woo! And I've just been delighted with the product since I started using it. I think I've probably done the most in the country at the moment, but I'm sure at some point in the future one of my colleagues will surpass me on that. And I was kindly invited to go to Shanghai with the company to go and present a couple of my cases, which I will show you later. By the way, this channel is all about keeping up with the latest developments in aesthetics. So if you're interested in things like Sunakos, Regeran, Gowrie, which are some of my more recent videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Okay, so first of all, JULÄINE is a poly-L-lactic acid. I know some of you are maybe feeling disappointment when I say that because you were expecting me to say something really wild and wacky, and you're like, oh, it's another poly-L-lactic acid. Why should I care about that? Well, friends, let me tell you, I also thought the same when I first heard about it. but having tried it, I can tell you it is not like other poly-L-lactic acids that are available on the market. It is completely different. They have their own proprietary manufacturing technology. I know all the brands do, but the difference is the particle sizes for JULÄINE are smaller in comparison with other poly-L-lactic acids. So the average particle size of JULÄINE is 32.6 micrometers as opposed to a competitor poly-L-lactic acid, which is 45.6. The particles of JULÄINE are also perfectly spherically created as opposed to being quite jaggedy around the edges, and that has a difference when you inject it into the skin and when you reconstitute it. So the JULÄINE can be reconstituted immediately prior to use. It doesn't have any of that horrible foaming that you see around the sides of the vials of competitor poly-L-lactic acids. It also doesn't have any, sometimes you can see little bits of undissolved product in the vials of other poly-L-lactic acids. And also when you inject it, it doesn't get stuck in the cannula or the needle like competitors are often want to do. So because the particle size is smaller and it's much more uniform, you don't get the clumping that you can with other poly-L-lactic acids. So it's much easier to inject. There's practically no risk of granuloma. I've never seen one out of all the cases that I've done, whereas with other products that I have tried, I have seen granuloma, and I have indeed had granuloma myself when I've had them injected. If you compare that to hyaluronic acid, whose average size is 100 to 700 micrometers, you can see that the JULÄINE is much smaller, which of course has an implication in the risk of things like vascular occlusion. Just before I go any further, I just want to touch on Poly-D-Lactic Acid because a few people have been asking me about this. So Poly-D-Lactic Acid is something which is not found naturally in human metabolism, although it is found in some bacteria. Poly-D-Lactic Acid is an enantiomer of poly-L-lactic acid. So if you remember in your chemistry that molecules can be sometimes right or left-handed, and they will have different effects on the body. So for example, one type of thalidomide which was used to treat women with morning sickness was very teratogenic, and it had huge impact on the number of birth defects, whereas the other enantiomer was actually fine, and it's used now for people with leprosy. Not that there's many people, but I'm sure that there are some, perhaps in some countries. So poly-L-lactic acid is cleared by the body, whereas poly-D-lactic acid is not easily cleared by your own metabolism, and it can build up in the tissue. What does this mean? Well, it could potentially stimulate immune cells. There's less published evidence for poly-D-lactic acid than there is poly-L-lactic acid. When it does break down, the shape of the molecule changes a little bit, so it becomes more like an amorphous structure, as opposed to the poly-L-lactic acid, which tends to keep its structure, and it's not commonly used as a standalone polymer. So to summarise, that's why I'm not particularly interested in injecting a poly-D-lactic acid at the moment. When JULÄINE breaks down, it breaks down into carbon dioxide and water. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of published evidence for poly-L-lactic acid. This particular type of PLLA is thought to activate more the M2 pathway for macrophages rather than the M1. So in that way, it's a little bit different to the other products that I have tried. What that means clinically is I have observed that there is no feeling of fibrotic tissue after somebody has been injected with JULÄINE. Certainly when I used some of the other products, you could see that there was almost a very stiff kind of appearance to the skin if one had injected multiple vials over a period of time, whereas I have not seen that using the JULÄINE. I now don't use any other type of poly-L-lactic acid in the clinic. I only use this because it gives you a bigger improvement than the other ones do. The safety profile is much better. It's much easier to inject. You see the results much more quickly. So I'm seeing results, I would say, a week and a half out after treatment. And there's this really interesting compactness that you get to the skin after having the injection, which is indeed why people are choosing this over having hyaluronic acid, because one of the issues with using multiple syringes of HA is it doesn't really do anything for the flaccidity of the skin. So if somebody has got very droopy, flaccid, empty feeling skin, you inject the JULÄINE, it kind of, and I really hate to use this word, but I'm going to use it, it sort of snatches everything up a little bit and it makes it much more compact. The actual treatment for JULÄINE is pretty straightforward. You may use a topical anesthetic beforehand, you may not. I'd say it's 50-50 whether or not patients want to use it. I would normally inject it using a cannula with a fanning technique. It's a very quick treatment. It doesn't hurt because of the numbing effect of the product that we mix the JULÄINE with. It comes as a powder. We have to mix it with saline in order to get it into the skin. The area where you've had the injection, it can look a little bit swollen. It normally takes about 48 hours for that to begin to go down, but it's not long-lived at all. And in that respect, it's very similar to hyaluronic acid. You can inject it in multiple places. So at the moment, here at least they have approval for treatment of nasolabial fold, but of course, like all these things, we use it off-label in other areas. So I've injected it personally into the hairline to lift, into the temple. You can treat the lateral cheek, the submalar region, the anterior cheek, the periorbital region, including the upper lid, of course the nasolabial fold. You can treat the jawline, you can treat the chin, the neck, décolletage, inner arms, abdomen, thighs, buttocks, pretty much anywhere you can treat it with JULÄINE. How many vials will you need? Well, if you look at the manufacturer's website, they will suggest that you should do 3 vials, which are 1 month apart. This is because there are some stricter medical device regulation rules coming into the country very soon, so they can't say to inject anymore. But in my experience, if you have only mild to moderate volume loss or sagging, yeah, you'll probably get away with doing 3 vials. However, the vast majority of patients, if you're looking for something a little bit more serious, you would need to use more than this. I don't like to inject more than 3 at a time. If you're treating the face, that's my absolute maximum. Typically 1 to 2 is more normal. Of course, when you're treating a body area, you would need to use more than this. JULÄINE is one of those treatments that it kind of does a bit of everything. So your skin develops a much more airbrushed kind of texture. And look, I have used pretty much every single injectable moisturizer that there is under the sun at some point, and I have tested them all. And my favorites are Sunakos. I think it works really well. Profilo has a place. I like 70 Hyal for a quick, immediate, lots of hydration hit. I sometimes use polynucleotides. I think Regeran is the best one. And look, I've tried pretty much all of them at some point just to see whether or not they're any good. There isn't anything in that list which will make the skin look as good as doing JULÄINE. There just isn't. There isn't. I've tried them all, and I do a lot of injections. I'm in that clinic 4 days a week, 10 till 8, and I see a lot of people, and I'm telling you, this is one of the best treatments, if not the best treatment that you can have. That's why it has rapidly become one of my top 3 best-selling treatments. This, tox, and laser. And I could pretty much just run my entire clinic now just using those 3 things. As I mentioned, I do still use hyaluronic acid for certain things. So, you know, if you could let me stretch to 5 treatments, I would put that on there. I think it works really well. For example, around the eye, you can use JULÄINE. It doesn't help with dark circles. So if someone's got dark circles, I will still use Sunakos. If someone's having a thread lift, I might inject the JULÄINE at the same time or before they have a thread lift. It seems to work well. It firms the tissue up and makes it easier for the thread to get purchase in the skin. I also think it combines really well with 70-Hyal, because sometimes you just want that immediate hydration that you will get from a product like 70-Hyal, or maybe you just in general have a lot of dehydration in a particular area. But having said that, the JULÄINE, it has an effect on the extracellular matrix of the skin, and definitely over the more medium to longer term, if a patient has got skin which is on the drier side, this seems to have an effect on that. And in my experience, I've seen that the skin will become less dry. We have a lot of viewers from the States, so you may be thinking, oh, this is really annoying, we're not going to have this anytime. They actually do have an office in America, because the company are aiming for FDA approval. Of course, that will take a little bit longer, but don't worry, you're not going to end up in a Profilo type situation where they don't even try, because that's been what, like more than 10 years Profilo's been out, and they still haven't gone for FDA approval. But anyway, at the moment, the product is available in certain countries in Europe, and it has been in China for about 7 years now. So a lot of the data is from China, which is good, because it means that it's not a new and untested thing which has been injected. But just to emphasize, the product that we use in Europe is manufactured in Sweden, which is the home of Galderma. So they make Restylane there, Azelor. So to summarize, if you want natural collagen stimulation, you want skin that's firmer, more lifted, tighter, but without using hyaluronic acid, without running the risk so much of vascular occlusion or of looking puffy afterwards, then look at JULÄINE. JULÄINE is suitable for people who want to do prejuvenation, so maybe you're just first starting to see the signs of aging and you just want a little bit of firming. And you can also use it for rejuvenation as well. So if somebody has got much heavier face and heavier skin, you're also a candidate. Okay, so I'm going to end the video with some images of my case studies from JULÄINE. If you like the video, don't forget to ring the notification bell and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about the JULÄINE, please leave them in the first 24 hours after the video is published, because that's the time when I'm really on top of looking at these things. If you're interested in finding out if JULÄINE is suitable for you, I'm going to put all our contact details in the description, and also our WhatsApp number.